All right. Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Nathan Frazee. I'm the project manager for improvements to Town Field. Next slide. So as you just heard, the meeting is being recorded tonight. It's also possible that participants may be recording on their own devices. So if you do not wish to be recorded, please keep your microphones and cameras off. Tonight's recording will be posted on the project page. So any neighbors, friends, or anybody you may think would be interested in the park and the design process and how it's progressing, they can follow along and watch that video at a later date. Next. During this meeting, we're going to have some engagement throughout the presentation, but also the question and answer at the end. So you'll be able to unmute yourself during the question and answer portion. Throughout the presentation, though, you can use non-verbal commands with the thumbs up, things like that. Yes, no. You'll also be able to use the chat feature, so you can ask questions or make comments throughout the presentation. We'll do our best to answer those as we're going along. And then again, raising your hand at the end. We also want to make sure this is a pleasant conversation for all. So please be respectful and mindful of each other's time this evening. Let's keep comments and questions project specific. Next. So tonight's agenda, we're going to do a quick introduction of the design team. We're going to look at the project schedule and process. Then the design team will look into, do a recap of previous meetings, go over the project guiding principles, look at some concepts, alternatives for spaces, and then we'll move into a discussion where we're going to look for a lot of input from you on how we're doing. Next. So as I said, my name is Nathan Frazee. I'm a project manager at the Parks Department. Our design team for this project is Agency. They have Kate Took and Radhika Mahan from their office who are going to be doing the presentation. So you'll be hearing from them very soon. They also have a complete team with other components who will be engaging offline throughout the design process. Next. So looking at the project schedule, we kicked off some of our engagement in late summer, early fall. We did, the design team did a site analysis. They looked at everything that from physical conditions as well as gathering input. We had our previous community meeting where we looked for input from you all on what are things that work well, what doesn't work well, what kind of vision you would like to see for improvements at the park. So we're here tonight where we're going to start looking at actual concepts based on some of that input. We're going to use the previous information we've gathered along with input from these design concepts. We're going to put together a cost estimate as well as what we're calling a confirmed refined concept. We're going to try and seek construction dollars for that. Based on how that funding comes, we'll be looking in the spring to transition into a full construction document package. And then as funding becomes available, that's when we'll look to start construction projects. Next. So just looking at what goes into our design process and for projects in general. The first thing is community input, which is why we're here tonight. We're allowing you guys to be the top, really kind of guiding the process and making sure everything we're doing here makes sense and is what the vision and what the neighborhood wants for its open space. The city also has a set of priorities. The one that's most critical for this site is climate resiliency, as this part of Dorchester is in a pretty big heat island. So we want to see what we can do to help mitigate those environmental concerns. From a parks and recreation standpoint, we have our own set of goals. Again, I think the adaptive, resilient landscapes, as well as creating diverse and mixed use is probably most critical for this area. And then the final item is safety and regulatory guidelines. These are, all of the code compliant things that we need to adhere to for any any design and construction project we do. Next. So again, we're here to listen. Again, that the agency is going to go through some feedback that we've gone as well as these concepts, but it's really critical to have you all engaged in this process. So we're going to be sharing some information, but we're going to be asking a lot of questions. So we look forward to your input. The goal for tonight is that we're going to learn a bit more about what the community values are for Townfield. We want you to express your thoughts on what works in each design concept and what needs to be improved. With that being said, you're going to see a series of concepts. None of those are set in stone in any way. So you can, if there's certain elements you like from one, but maybe you like the overall on the other, share that information, because now is the time we can make those tweaks and really kind of morph the entire thing to suit the needs and desires of the neighborhood. So also share the excitement about the future of Townfield with others. So again, if your friends and neighbors or leagues are not able to attend tonight, we still will want their feedback in the process, because we acknowledge, not everybody can attend all of these meetings. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate and Radhika for their presentation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nate. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. It's good to see many familiar faces who we've seen as part of the process already, and we're looking forward to a lively discussion. So we're going to start, as Nate said, by sharing a little bit about what we've heard from you already through the several touch points over the summer and the fall to understand what's important to keep and what's important to change about Townfield. And then we'll dive into conceptual options and have lots of opportunity for you to share what you like and what we should continue to tweak. So I think we wanted to start by just acknowledging that this is a really active and much beloved community resource with many active sports field amenities, the softball and the baseball fields being really anchors to the community. As well as all of the additional lawn space, providing soft green space and tree canopy that the community has really much valued over many years. There's also the amenities of the basketball and playground and plaza and the original field house, which, although smaller in terms of overall proportion of park area, are clear magnets for use. I think because the park is so green, because it's predominantly sports fields and lawn, it's a remarkably pervious place. So it's already infiltrating stormwater and has a pretty robust, mature tree canopy from many, many decades of having been a public park that's been used by this community. I think we really value the voices that have already shared a lot about how the park is used today, both from an active programming standpoint from ADSL, as well as other community groups that are using the space for different kinds of events and running, basketball programs and tournaments and other, uses on the park. So we've really appreciated those conversations, both one-on-one, in small groups, the site tours that you all have used to give us a window into what's working and what needs addressing as part of this renovation. I think what we've tried to do as a design team is listen with an ear towards a couple of different themes, and these came out of your feedback. We heard in our conversations with you all a lot about park edges, arrival, and moving around the park. Things like the entrances need a little more definition. We really need to consider differently the edges, especially along homes, as different from those along busier streets. And some infrastructure concerns around, drainage and fencing, and how some of those things have fallen into disrepair over many years of park use. We heard a ton about playing and watching sports in the space, the value of multi-purpose fields, spaces for community group activities, both fitness and games, the value of both softball and basketball courts, and the value of baseball, but maybe sort of less so compared to those other sports uses. And we heard a lot about bleachers and the need to sit and watch sports, but maybe bleachers aren't a needed part of the park program at this point. I think that in terms of social activities and events, it was so helpful to hear from those who have hosted events like the Peace Walk at the park, and that desire for a small stage or a gathering area, the ability to plan for large events and have some infrastructure that can support those things. And then the sort of more smaller social needs, many of which are already being met by the newly renovated plaza and playground, but specifically, we heard quite a lot about the community garden and its needs around storage and access to water. So in thinking through kind of what we were hearing from you all around those key topics, we took a first stab at what we call draft guiding principles. And so these are themes that emerged from our conversations with you all that start to express goals that we heard you have for the future of the park. So those are first and foremost welcoming and connected park experience. I think we understand, as you do, that really great parks have great edges that stitch well into the neighborhood context. And so we want to make sure, as we think about these options together tonight, that it feels comfortable to arrive and to navigate through the park. We, I think, heard really clearly that it was important to have a diversity of active field recreation amenities. We know that this is a recreational destination, not just for the neighborhood, but really for all of Dorchester. And we want to explore together tonight which fields and courts and active recreation resources are going to best support the needs of this community. And then finally, I think when we think about what we heard from you all around community and social needs and gathering space within the park, I think we recognize that this is already a heart of community activity. And we want to understand and explore in the conceptual options how the park can better support event and everyday use. So we're going to look at some options for the park tonight, and we want to emphasize that what we're bringing to you is sort of a menu of options. It's a little bit mix and match, and so we're going to bring you a couple of different options in 3 different categories. The first is looking at park edges and arrival, trying to get at that sense of how do we make this a welcoming and connected experience? We're then going to look at what makes this a great heart of the Fields Corner community, so that center of the park, and then how the fields are a great amenity on either side. We're actually going to invert those last 2. But we really want to look at sort of these things in categories, show you some options, ask you what you prefer, and then consider that we can mix and match those things into a park that has the best of all of those different categories. So we're going to dive into a welcoming and connected experience first. Take it away, Veronica.
Thanks, Kate. So as Kate noted, great parks have great edges and entries. So we want to learn from you all how we can make sure it feels comfortable to arrive at Townfield and navigate through it. So you'll see a couple of different options here. The first option is to celebrate the historic gateways. There are significant historic entrances already along the edges of the park, currently at Park Avenue at the top, Burnside Street at the left side, and along Dorchester Avenue at the right side. So how can we really celebrate these historic gateways, bring the community in, and then create an internal network of pathways to help you navigate through the park? We are also considering how the planted buffers or the edges interact with the neighborhood. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. In the second option, we would look at increasing the number of entries and creating more of these internal loops within the park along the edges of the perimeter. So for example, at Burnside, at Park Street, where you have the current entrance, while that's not accessible, we would propose making another accessible entrance along the same street frontage to help bring people in an accessible manner. Similarly, we would look to open up a few strategic locations along the edges of the park to help draw the community in from different locations. So today we'd love to hear from you how you would like to enter and how you would like to navigate within the park. So on the next slide, you see we start to see what these could look like. So in option A, celebrating the historic gateways, Townfield has this great character of these stone entryways leading you into the park. So how can we use these as the main elements that draw people into the park in the future? In the second option, we are really looking at creating a perimeter path along the edges of the fields to see how they can be used in different ways. It could be, a running path with mile markers. It could be, it could have little areas for rest and respite. And it could just be an activated edge along the park as well. We could also have places for pause along this circulation path. Again, at strategic locations where you could look down and really be a part of the active field recreational activities. So our first question for you all today is, we'd love to hear from you all how you think Townfield should welcome the community. Is it by celebrating the historic gateways, or increasing the number of entries and creating an internal circulation loop, or something else which you can tell us about in the chat?
Yeah, we're inviting you tonight to use the chat to answer these poll questions. So you can simply answer the letter, or you can share a little bit more about your opinion, and that would be really helpful. We'll stay here for a minute and just process what we're seeing up here in the chat. I see someone is quite clear on B, so the opportunity to increase, to have more entries and a loop that brings you around the park. Lots of energy around B, so that's really helpful to see. I think we've got, wow, and we have a B exclamation mark even. So yep, many ideas about B being pretty clearly a winner in your minds. And I think as we get into the discussion a little bit later on, would love to hear more from you all about why that's so emphatically the right choice. Is it about the loop, or is it about having those additional entries? So Mike is saying limited, a couple of new entries. Yep, and also that opinion that increase the entries but keep the historic entries so that the stone features can remain. This is really helpful. I haven't seen a single person prefer A or a different option yet. So that's really helpful. You can feel free to keep answering, and we'll get more into this in the discussion. But I think that idea around providing more access to the park certainly seems to have some value in your minds. So we want to move on here around this question of how do we diversify the active field recreation opportunities? We know this is a recreational destination for Dorchester, and really want to have a good conversation with you all about sports fields and courts, and which ones are best supporting the needs of this community today. I'll note that while basketball is part of the sports, court amenities, we're going to tackle that in the next section or in the next section of the presentation. So this is really about the fields, these two options, and really thinking about how the fields can support use. So I think, we know that you have a softball and a baseball field currently, and that the outfields of those fields are often used for additional, field sport recreations, kind of pickup games. So option A really says we lean into what's great about what you have already. Leave softball as is with its flexible outfields that you already program, but think about baseball as something that you can diversify a little bit into a multi-use striped field where the striping can change in different seasons and allow some flexibility. You could have that soccer program happen when baseball is not in season. So that's one option. It's kind of light touch and pretty simple. It really just diversifies the one baseball field. Option B says, okay, what if we relocate softball, which we know is a pretty actively used amenity, and restripe the baseball diamond so that it could be baseball, softball, and multi-use striping. So soccer, lacrosse, football, even. So that upper field becomes very multi-purpose and frees up the area closer to the Park Street and Dorchester Ave intersection, closer to the heart of Fields Corner, for sort of more active amenities. We've shown here a couple of different amenities that could be added there that are scaled, so you can get a sense of how much might fit. But you could add things like a futsal or a pickleball or street hockey court there, a skate park or parkour amenities, a pump track like exists elsewhere in the city. And I think we're curious whether that kind of more active amenity closer to that heart of Fields Corner would be of interest to you all. We want to share just a couple of examples of that. So on the left, you can see for option A, just that idea of diversifying the baseball field with multiple striping. This is something that the city of Boston is increasingly doing, as are cities nationwide, to build in flexibility so that park fields, which are in great demand, can be used in all seasons with a wide variety of different kind of field sports. So at McConnell Park and Garvey Playground, these are projects the city has recently completed that are that multi-purpose striping. And then on the right-hand side, that idea of, what do you do with the softball field if you relocate the softball program to share space with baseball and the other multi-purpose fields on the upper field? Perhaps there's opportunities to build in parkour, to build in street hockey, like is done at Moakley Park, a skate park or a pump track, like exists at Smith Field in Alston. So we want to hear from you now. Again, use the chat function, if you will, to tell us a little bit more about which field options best align with your vision for the park. Should we A, diversify the baseball field with striping, leave softball just as it is? Should we B, relocate softball in order to have a more sort of diverse menu of options for the northern corner? Or C, tell us in the chat something else. I'm just going to catch up on the chat for a moment. Looks like there was a lot of activity back and forth. A lot more kind of information about the about navigating the park edges. And not yet any activity sharing about this idea of fields yet. We want to make sure that the fields are available for the community and not rented for private leagues. Thanks, Jeff. That's a really nice point, and certainly something that comes into play around policy for Boston parks. Steve is liking B, this idea that we could diversify that northeastern corner of the park. A, there might be a possibility of softball and baseball having a game at the same time. I think in the discussion later, I would love to hear a little bit more about when that happens and how often that happens. Sarah jumping in with a preference for B as well. You can feel free to keep answering this question. Mixed feelings about combining baseball fields. Thank you, Candace. Yep, there's not a dedicated field for softball leagues. And it feels like baseball is the priority. That's an interesting point. I'll note that, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing I would note, just in some of the diversified elements, you can also feel free to put in the chat what elements of that diversification you like as well. If it is the futsal, if it is the pump track, if it, we can, that way we can look at engaging that in any concept that we go with. So don't just focus on either option, but also the elements of it.
Yeah, and that's the next question, actually. So I think we're hearing a little bit of a split, and I think we can dig into this a little bit more in the discussion, that there's some mixed feelings about baseball, softball, multi-use striping, and the option to have more amenities. So I think our next question really is, if you were going to diversify your fields and provide some additional amenities, which of these additional amenities most appeal to you? What do you think would be best aligned with the needs of this community for recreational amenities? Is it a pump track? You can see some of the some of the examples here, the pump track in Smithfield and Alston. Is it futsal, which is like court soccer? Is it a skate park? Parkour, which for those who don't know is kind of like a skate park, but without a skateboard. So you do sort of urban gymnastics on that. It's a sport that's gaining some momentum. Pickleball, street hockey, lawn games like bocce and cornhole, which could be deployed by ADSL or others as a programming partner and then packed away. Lawn tennis or other. Tell us in the chat. So I'm hearing a little bit about futsal. Yep. And pump track and asphalt path. Yep. So there's some concerns, I think, that Nathan is responding to about, whether we would lose green space in diversifying, which is a great point. There are certainly some trade-offs with which amenities are added, and how do you maintain the green feel of the park. Flag football and futsal. Thank you all for jumping in. So you can feel free to continue answering that question in the chat. We want to dive in now to the center of the park a little bit. And, we've just talked about fields and entries to the park, and know there are some good opinions there that we can dig into in the discussion. And before we open to discussion, we want to also dig into what we call the heart of the park. It's that really active spine between Dorchester Avenue and Park Street. Where basketball, where the ADSL building is, where the current bleachers are, and the community garden, and the playground. All of that is in that sort of active heart of the park. And we know that the space is used for a wide variety of uses already, and want to propose some options about how we can better use the space. So Radhika and I are going to tag team this a little bit. When it comes to option A, I think one last thing to note as sort of a framing piece here is that there's actually quite a bit of grade change. There's elevation change between your upper field and your lower field. Those who are familiar with the park know that spine exists on that grade change. And I think partly what we're going to be asking you here is, how do you want to use that change in elevation to your advantage? So option A is really thinking, okay, what if we reorganize the basketball courts, which we know are an incredibly popular amenity, on the lower level of that grade change. In doing so, what that allows for us to do is use the grade as sort of a natural amphitheater or natural hillside seating. So it allows us to look, to sit on that space, to look at the activity of a basketball tournament, for example, and have community functions on that higher level at your backside if you're watching basketball. So the community gardens, some seating or seating sculptures that could look at the baseball field or a multi-purpose field on the upper level, and sort of a walkway that would allow a really nice sort of plaza promenade feel, connecting the plaza on Dorchester Avenue with a new plaza overlooking Park Street. You can see in pink how we're starting to imagine that the Park Street entrance could be amended slightly to allow accessible entry for the significant grade at that corner as well. On the bottom here is just a little bit of an illustration, again, trying to get that feeling of what it might be like to sit on that slope and look at the activities on the basketball field or on the basketball court. You could also imagine that a community event could take place on that basketball court when basketball was not happening. So you have that paved space at the bottom of sloped seating.
In the second option, we flip the relationship of basketball and the community space. So we would have basketball as it exists today on the higher side, but separated by a new plaza with some seating and trees and shade. On the lower side, we would have a community gathering space, potentially with the community garden, and really all of the grade or the seating is built into the slope that's between the higher level basketball and the lower level community garden and plaza. So in this condition, the relationship of your activities is a little bit different. You have basketball on the higher side that kind of overlooks softball. And then you have the community garden and a lower plaza that could be used for events, gatherings, and things like that, with seating built into the slope. Again, as we try to show in pink, are some of the important connections we will continue to maintain between the entrance and plaza along Dorchester Avenue and connecting all the way up to Park Street. These are some images of how some of these site elements and site features could be landed in space. So on the left side are some images from the Garvey Playground in Dorchester, again, really showing the relationship of the seating that overlooks the active recreation and the sports. On the right side, we have gathering spaces that are sort of at grade at the lower level, with some seating along the backs as well, and up against grade change, but slightly different relationships as we start to consider how the different activities play into the design of the park.
So tell us now, I think we've shared a couple of different options for how the community amenities, including basketball, but also community gathering space, could be arranged on that slope, and are curious whether one aligns better with the vision of this group. Is it better to put the basketball down low and have that natural slope seating looking at it? That's option A. Is it better to keep basketball high with some space to gather between the basketball courts, and then really focus that sloped seating on a plaza space closer to the ADSL building that would allow more dedicated space for community and cultural events? Or is there another option that you want to tell us about in the chat? So I see a couple of folks weighing in that A is preferred. I think that, yeah, definitely a couple of folks talking about A. This idea that we would build in sort of sloped seating facing basketball, and the basketball would kind of be in the outfield of the softball field, where the softball field is currently, but potentially with additional diversified amenities at its back. And I hear, Mike, that you're asking some questions about the community garden. I think that's a great thing to raise in the discussion, and think about how we build that function in. We're suggesting in both options that it's kind of on that upper level, either stretched out, in sort of a longer linear pattern, or potentially concentrated as an amenity closer to the cultural space. Yeah, Jeff, we hear you on accessibility. And so that's diagrammed into these. And I think, ADA will require that. And we also believe deeply in universal access between these two different levels. So we haven't illustrated that in these chunks, but both in terms of park entrances, as well as navigating within the park, we would ensure that there were accessible connections. So rest assured that that doesn't have to be a decision point. Either one of them could be made to be universally accessible. Excellent, thank you. So definitely I heard a couple of votes for A, this idea of facing sports, and then this a couple of folks weighing in that the natural performance space of B has some appeal. So I think as we get into a discussion, it would be nice to hear you all weigh for us. In either case, you could have community gathering happen with a natural amphitheater. But is it important for that to be a separate space than basketball, or is it okay for it to share space with basketball? So just to summarize, I think we're about to open it up to discussion and have a good chat together, but I think what we've tried to do is share sort of two different approaches with you all about how do we enter and navigate through the park either through dedicated gateways or through many additional entrances with a loop path that circumnavigates the park. You all were quite clear that that second option was preferred. There was a little bit more of a split in terms of what we heard from you about field sports. There's I think a lot to dig into from a discussion perspective there about wanting some additional amenities, but not necessarily wanting to shift softball. And then finally, I think hearing that there's some energy building around the ability to look down at basketball, but also the desire to balance that with cultural activities and other types of events that can be flexible. So in a moment, we're going to open it up to discussion. I think I just wanted to let Nate frame the discussion before we do so.
Thanks, Kate. Well, again, so we are, as Kate mentioned, we're going to open it up so we can actually hear from you all. During this portion, we ask that you're respectful and mindful of each other's time. Please ask one initial question, and then as we have time, follow up with additional questions you may have. Keep any of the questions and comments project specific, and we'll go from there. So at this point, if you don't mind raising your hands, and then we'll allow you to unmute yourself. Another quick thing I want to mention. Go ahead, Kate.
Nate, we're going to stop screen sharing so we can see folks' faces if they'd like to share, but we can always share again if folks want to look at something in particular.
Yep. Great. And the other thing I just recap, which I had mentioned earlier, out of all of these concepts, be sure to tell us the elements you like of them, because we can try and help, integrate those into any of the designs that we go with. So Caroline, I think I saw your hand go up, but did it go down? You're good.
Nate, I also want to just reiterate that we are recording the chat, and we'll keep that as an active record. So if you want to emphasize anything in the chat, that works well for us, but also know that if you've said it in the chat, we have registered that too. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thanks all. And yes, I was confused about a meeting. Yeah, I really appreciate this presentation and glad we got a bunch of neighborhood folks on tonight. I think some things, I just want to lift up, and this is like not about my personal opinion, but just what I've been hearing over the last 2 years is I think the convening space is like in some ways the top priority beyond folks who are involved with youth sports. It's like unique, I think, to our neighborhood that we have such robust convening space and that we're able to activate it. And to Jeff's point, I think it's a core part of how we continue to build the multiracial working class neighborhood we have. So I think in any design, I think there's question about where the basketball should go. Could the basketball court be welcoming as a convening space? I'm not sure, but I just want to lift up that I think that is a thing I've heard consistently. And then also just in terms of types of sports, I personally don't have a lot of opinions, except that I think it's important that we cater to the diversity of our communities. So I would go tennis over pickleball for those kind of demographic reasons. I would, I think soccer has been a big need, right? In the neighborhood in general. I live very close to Hemingway Park, and we all know that sports, it's very racialized who's doing what, and it's just important that we are conscious of the racial mix, the demographic mix of who's interested in what sports. And then just to I think walkability is really huge. I think if you're not part of any of the activities right now, there's actually no way to access the full park. And so I think opportunities to access the full space, like the path, etc., would be really important to make folks feel like it is a large asset in our neighborhood, and not the way I experience it just as a pedestrian is a corner of it is accessible, and then there's a lot of field that's only kind of sports field.
All very good points. I mean, and so one thing, just speaking of how right now basketball is very fenced off. It's got a tall fence all the way around it. One of the ways we can soften that and allow it to feel more open and welcoming, on top of fresh new paint and everything looking nice, is actually reducing fencing, which one of these lends itself a little bit towards less fencing, but opening the sides of the courts up more, so they don't have to be so tall, is one way to allow that to be a little bit more engaging and open in the space. I'm gonna ask any other hands up before Caroline again. Oh, Candace. Caroline, we'll come back to you, okay?
No, I could wait for Carolyn,
That's all right.
my pal.
You're already unmuted, so go ahead, Candace.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to, because we're in the park 7 days a week.
Yeah.
12 hours a day. I'm very excited about this opportunity, but I've also lived in this to see the rhythm of this place. And I know we clearly know that basketball is huge. It is huge. And it's growing. Our numbers are growing exponentially for the kids who use the space. So it's, I guess the challenge for the designers is, how do you create something as it's growing, right? Because you don't know the needs. And as we had talked before, baseball is definitely not the pick of the litter right now. Softball is growing. We have over 200 plus girls who play in the leagues. And what I hear from them is that one of the issues, which is what I posted in the chat, is that they are sort of pushed to the side to make room for baseball fields. It happened at McConnell. There's discussions now at Walsh Park around that. So it's, how do you accommodate that? What kind of message are you sending to our populations around that? And so I just wanted to point it out, that is a consideration for a lot of community members who can't be on this call. But I love the idea with the garden, the performance space. I think when they started the design for the park, there was some a consideration of that, and could that be expanded in some way? And again, we're not everybody's going to get everything they need here, because it is 5.7 acres, and I'm happy because it is now an active place and people are starting to care about Townfield, which, my time in Dorchester, it was always a vast wasteland of you don't want to go there at certain times of the day. It's a good thing. I know it's going to be challenging coming together. I just wanted to put out a little bit of what I could see with the growing needs of this park, which I'm very happy to see, and interested in continuing the conversation to make this a really welcoming, usable space as best we can.
Candace, I think I've asked this before, but I think one of the things we're grappling with is whether there's a need for more basketball courts, or whether there's a need for sort of more diverse hardscape that could be occasionally programmed that way, like it's flexible.
I'm going to defer to my friend
You or anyone else, have an opinion on that? We've only shown 2 because you have 2 right now.
I don't know if Nugget wants to feed in on that, because now we're collaborating more with other organizations. So I'm probably not the authority to tell you that. I know that the basketball courts are well used in the nice weather, but in the winter, like, other parts of the field, it is pretty, it just sits fallow. There's not a lot going on, which is why I did have a pitch for my little skating area, because that would be such a dream that I would love to see realized. But I know I don't want to put you guys in a difficult position to try to figure that one out. But that would be nice. But yeah, Steve, sorry, Nugget would be the best person to see. There is a tremendous interest in basketball from what I can tell. Soccer, that we've pulled off the backfield for soccer, and flag football. There's space for that, which I think you've probably taken into consideration from what I could see in the renderings. So it's a lot. It's challenging.
All really good input, and again, diversifying the space and all of the program that is offered out there is what's helping drive activity, which is great. Caroline, I'm gonna let you speak again real quick, and then I'm gonna go to Nugget, and then Tran, I'll get to you. There we go. You should be able to unmute,
Thanks,
Caroline.
Nathan, and sorry, y'all, that I forgot my last, but Jordan's point made me just think, I think one thing just to flag is lights and lighting. I know Chief White Hammond had mentioned like you all are piloting some of the things like with push buttons or other things, but just like even Garvey Park, which is like the fanciest one we got. I mean, it's like dead this time of year. And I think a lot of it is just has to do with lighting. So, and just to make walkability work. And just to Jordan's point, the other thing I was thinking is, yeah, benches and like informal convening space. I know we have the new stuff by ADSL and that's huge, but just thinking again about, especially for summer, I think what has been really special over the past few years, especially with Candace's leadership, is that like individuals in the neighborhood feel like they can have like, you know, like young people can like have their birthday party at a few tables in the park. I mean, that kind of stuff matters. And so just how do we allow for that? So those are my last two and I'll stop talking now.
Great, excellent points. All right, Nugget, I'm gonna allow you, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So hey guys, to Candace's point, definitely for the basketball court, 2 courts are definitely needed. A lot of issues with the court, but I would have to follow up with Nate on that. I have a lot of issues with the court. Fencing was definitely an issue. Seating is definitely an issue, but for us doing the sports there for at least 4 months out of the year, I would say 2 courts was definitely a must. The community day was a big thing, and then the backpack giveaway was also a big thing. So the court was definitely needed. I would say definitely keep that. Whatever way we can fix the courts will definitely be key for me, and add additional things to it, like a scoreboard and other things I have written down, but it's a lot to just talk about right now.
Thanks, Nugget. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All good points. And again, I think all of those can be addressed in any concept we're doing. So we'll make sure we can improve those courts, certainly. Tran, you should be able to unmute now. That work? Yes.
Yes, thanks, Nathan. Hi, everyone. I'm Tran. My first time at a meeting here, so happy to be here. And yeah, thanks for the presentation, the information. So I definitely just want to advocate for the arts as being a local artist. And I think just in terms of accessibility, sports are really popular and important, but just thinking about even access to sports spaces in a community, different, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, just thinking about the accessibility of that. And in comparison, say for the arts, there's really no outdoor art spaces at all, especially performances. So just, recognizing just really the critical need of that. And especially in a very in a space where it shows that it's actually a theater performance, not just like seating that's put together and that can be like a makeshift space, but really recognizing that as, a space. And even with places that can cover for like sound system, for example. I know there are other places or in the city that people are even thinking about, especially when it comes to permitting, which is a hot mess in and of itself, and like what region of the park. So that just being kind of mindful of all that too, especially when getting, permission to even put on events. So just really, for me, just really advocating for the arts and thinking about local artists and networks and community spaces that wanting to put on cultural events, for example. And I think around just accessibility, even like wayfaring, make sure that, local community members can access, even navigating kind of the park, and just really the inclusion of it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tran. Really good points. And I think as Nathan said before, arts is something that can be incorporated actually as a layer into any of these concepts. And I think so continuing the conversation with you about what details would make that really amenable and welcoming and inclusive for different artists from the community to participate, I think would be really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeff, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation and the opportunity to give our feedback, just like everyone else. I would like to just, yeah, first amplify Carolyn and Tran's points. I think the best aspect of this field so far since we've been living here has been the events, the gatherings, and all of the really these huge activities that bring the whole community together, right? Yeah, they're pretty incredible. So I'd really highlight that and making sure that we can really I love attending, some of Tran's performance artwork pieces and things like that. But even the way it's set up right now, you can tell it's it's not really set up in a way that's going to gets the attention that it deserves type thing. So and then just wanted to add a couple points just about the futsal soccer, just is because I do know of Vietnamese community here. I know that they go rent fields at Teamworks in Stoughton to play and stuff like that. I know that people go there's just plenty of different groups. A lot of different groups go to a lot of different places and that are not in this area, right? So because they don't have a field, and you get a lot of people through in the soccer field. And other than that, one last point is we have a 14-month-old, and we've been going over to using Townfield a lot more, going over to that little play area. If there's more play area developed or anything like that, I want to just highlight that the rocks around that play area don't exactly feel very safe for little children. I'm yeah, it's just something to be wary of is the materials that are used, even around the edges, not just on the field itself.
Understood. Thank you. Yeah.
All good input. And again, I think the amount of programming that you all are already doing here in a site is not conducive for that programming. It's commendable. And that's where I think we're here to try and, really let the site be more what you guys are already doing out there, if not that much more. So that's why we're here. Real quick, Nugget, your hand is still up. Did you have an additional comment, or was it just, I'm going to let you unmute if that was the case.
Yeah, I don't know why that was. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
All right, no worries. Just didn't want to miss. Okay. All right, Candace, I see. So you should be able to unmute again. Oh, still muted, Candace? Can't hear you, Candace. I think you're still muted here. Okay. Well, we'll try and get that figured out. I'm gonna, Jermaine, you should be able to unmute yourself. Oh, Candace.
Sorry. I don't know what happened. A window just popped up. Just this may be getting ahead of myself, but I know, in taking the consideration of performance space and lighting in general, I know we had talked briefly about lighting in the field, for example. Also for the events that we have, the big concern was that the power is drawn from the field house. And I know the field house is not part of this project, but the field house is woefully inadequate to accommodate microphones, big sound, movies, things like that, any kind of performances or, large gatherings. So I'm sure that's something that is something that we've talked about, and I think it's probably going to come up at some point in conversations, but I just wanted to bring it to the attention because we've had some disastrous outcomes with, thinking we have enough power and it just doesn't happen. So going forward, if we can correct that.
Mhm.
All good points.
Yeah, thank you. We hear you.
All right, Jermaine, I think I'll do it again just so you can unmute. There you go. You should be able to now.
Thanks. I just wanted to know, because I'm coming from another meeting, so I missed the bulk of this. Is there going to be like notes or the presentation shared so I could just get a, just visual of what's happening? Because I definitely missed most of the meeting.
Absolutely. We do have a project page for this. I just sent in the chat. The meeting is being recorded, so it will be posted online, so you can watch the video. We'll also put our presentation online, so you can see that as well.
Thank you.
And also, with that being said, after you review it, if you have comments, questions, feel free to email that. We can try and get that incorporated in meeting minutes as well. So just because you were able, you got on late, doesn't mean we're not going to still provide opportunity for your input as well.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for being here. George, you should be able to unmute now.
Thank you. Yeah, first I just want to thank you and your team for the presentation. So Nathan, Kate, and Radhika. And yeah, I really agree with a lot of what folks have said. And I appreciate kind of the inclusion of the community garden and how you're thinking about that. I was wondering, and we can definitely connect offline, if you had talked about where some of the tool storage and water access might be. I know it's been an ongoing kind of dilemma we're facing, working with Candace and the field house and trying to get folks activated and those garden beds activated from VA side, and Vina has been leading a lot of that work. But ultimately, we want to partner with Parks and the Environment Department to kind of find a long-term solution for that and really make it kind of more sustainable and efficient. So that was my first question, but just really want to reflect too that lots of these concerns regarding lighting, regarding just having open space, gathering space, space to walk around or even jog, and would really, I think, make the space really much more lively and much safer, and a lot more usable and user friendly. So, yeah.
George, do you mind if I kick a question back to you?
Sure.
Just in terms of what the community gardens are, I think sometimes there's a wide range in what community gardens can mean. Sometimes you have the very fenced off individual. Every individual has their own garden bed, and it's very kind of, even though it is community, it's also very individualized. So I guess I'm curious. Right now, these are open beds that are on top of the hill and the slope there. What is your all's vision and what's your goals with these beds? I think that'll help kind of gauge and shape what everybody else is understanding of it.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that. From our perspective, and then kind of defining this with Lisette, the former ED, and now Vina, who's been leading the charge through our youth program. The goal is to kind of provide access individually actually to these garden beds, and it's really a pilot right now, but we've solicited kind of interests from community members, and I think the goal at least is to assign individuals garden beds. We want to work also with ADSL, with Mission Safe, in kind of reserving, and of course our own program, and reserving at least one bed a piece for educational purposes, for our program's use, and then a majority of them will be public. I think a challenge with activating them thus far, and we can determine the length of time later on, whether it's a year or two, that they'll have access and be responsible for, their vegetation and just upkeep of their beds.
Mhm.
But that's kind of our vision, is, and our challenge, I guess, like I mentioned earlier, is without consistency and knowing that those beds will be available, right? It's beyond kind of, I don't think really folks have been concerned thus far about interference or other folks maybe
Mhm.
taking up their own space, right? It's a matter of kind of knowing that their tools will be there, that water will be available. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Great. That's really helpful. With that being said, yes, we can, within this design process, we'll be looking at, how can we make sure we have the correct utilities in the correct locations for, not just community gardening, but also the beds that Tran and Candace spoke to. Where we're looking comprehensively at the site, that really gives us the opportunity to make sure we're bringing that across where it needs to go. So we can certainly, we'll connect offline and work on specifics of that. But as a general point, we'll try and make sure we get all utilities there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for those comments. Any other comments, questions, or thoughts? Check the chat, make sure I don't miss anything there. Oh, Salima, you should be able to unmute.
Hello, I'm Salima. I just wanted to emphasize what Carolyn had said earlier around like lights and walkways. Growing up in Dorchester, yeah, I felt like Town Fields, like it's always dark and it makes me feel unsafe walking there at night as well. And I recently moved to Ashmont where I live closer to Hemingway Park now. And in the morning when I'm walking my dogs, like I definitely noticed that there's like a lot of like Vietnamese aunties gathering in the morning because Hemingway has like very nice walkways. And I think having more walkways in Town Field would be like more inviting to elders because there's not that many places in Dorchester for like elders to gather or like convene, and having more walkways would like help elders like getting outside and like utilizing the space as well.
Thank you. That's really
All
great.
very good points. And Jeff is commending that in the chat as well. So a lot of support for making sure that we're looking at those components as well. And Jordan, there we go. Okay. Any other comments or questions relating to the design? Seeing any? Tran, did you want to speak one more time real quick? I gotta find where you are in that. There we go. There you go. You should be able to unmute.
Sure. I just wanted to share that I'm hosting a community convening this Saturday at Viet Aid, December 16th from 12 to 2. I'm working on this memorial project directly in Dorchester for the Vietnamese diaspora. And so we're kind of formally announcing the project publicly on Saturday and inviting community engagement and feedback on really co-creating the process. So it's the first of 3 community convening, but it's open to everyone. It's bilingual in Vietnamese and English, and we'd love to, if you're available to come through. Food will be provided and really breakout sessions and thinking about the engagement process and to get feedback. So I'll drop the link in the chat too, but yeah, if you're around, please come by.
Perfect.
Great. Would love to circle back if there are any great ideas that come out of that for the park as well. Thank you.
Great. Oh, sorry, I missed a few things in the chat.
Yeah, Nate, there was one question from Sarah Silva about the timeline. Do you want to just address that
Yes.
one more time?
Yes. Well, real quick with the Sarah Silva Priscilla, I think you may have shared your login a few times because there's 4 of you in here. If that is the case, if you don't mind in the chat adding your individual contact information, that way we can make sure we're getting you meeting notes and future information on the project page. If it's just a technology glitch, ignore what I just said. In terms of timing, so right now we're working on getting an overall concept. With that, we're going to be putting a cost estimate associated with that and looking for capital dollar improvements for this. That capital request usually starts in January, which is why we're trying to make sure we get this feedback really kind of ahead of that requesting time period. And so that doesn't happen until city council officially votes on that. And you never know with budget sequences, and especially how influx economy that we're in right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to push through with the design process either way. We're going to get our construction documents really in a good position, and then as funding becomes available, then we'll start to greenlight the ability to construct these improvements. So it's a little not super direct answer, just because there's a few elements at play within our schedule, but we'll be sure to keep you all posted as that unfolds throughout the coming year. And Kate, thanks for saying that. Sorry, I missed it. And Sarah, I see your comment, so that's certainly great. I'm glad we have more people attending. All right. Any other comments? Anything?
Carolyn, we always love a little push for additional support.
Yes, certainly. All right. So with that being said, without seeing any other questions, comments, when is the next meeting? That's a good point. We're not exactly sure yet. That's not scheduled. Most likely we would be looking, just knowing with the holiday season, it can be a crazy time. So we're looking at probably towards the end of January, early February as the start of that. Gives us enough time to really distill all of the input we have and then come back with some really thought out and concise designs. So that's most likely what we'll be looking at. Again, if you registered online, which you're in here, we'll have your contact information. So we'll make sure when that next meeting is scheduled, we'll reach out to everybody and let them know about it. I am seeing a few more questions now. How does access look during construction? So that's a good point, and that very much depends on what exactly we're doing here. So it's hard to answer that right now. What is most cost effective is usually for a contractor to take full control of a site. That way they're not doing things in phases and mobilizing and demobilizing areas. However, again, without knowing our budget and without knowing what improvements we're going to be doing at this point, it's really too early to say. We certainly could look at doing a phased element depending on how funding is. And if that's the case, we would work with our contractor and our design documents to really make sure at least components of the park are available throughout the entire time. And absolutely, within any of our phased elements, we certainly do a prioritized list. And that's, and I can tell you just from a sequencing where the basketball courts are kind of in the back part of the site, it would make the most sense to work your way out. So there's certainly be a high end of that component, especially the spine of the entire park. Yeah, all great questions. All right. So with that being said, keep an eye out for the video being posted on the webpage, and then we'll be looking to get back with you all early next year. Yes, thank you all.
Appreciate your
Happy
feedback.
holiday.
Take care.